I never thought a plastic sled leaning against my garage would land me in a war with the most vindictive woman in Pine Grove, Colorado. But here we are. My name is Yates Thompson, and I have lived in the Willowbrook Estates subdivision for exactly 3 years. It is a decent neighborhood on the southern edge of Pine Grove, about 30 miles from Denver. The houses are cookie-cutter 2 stories with manicured lawns, and everyone waves at each other while secretly judging whose grass is greener. I bought the place after my divorce because it seemed quiet and normal. What I did not know was that our homeowners association president, a woman named Patricia Miller, treated HOA violations like federal crimes. It started on a Tuesday morning in late November. I had just gotten home from my shift at the fire station where I work as a paramedic. My body ached, and all I wanted was coffee and maybe a few hours of sleep before my daughter Emma came over for dinner. I work 24-hour shifts, 3 days a week, so my schedule is always chaotic. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a bright yellow envelope tucked into my front door. I knew what it was before I even opened it. Another HOA violation notice. I ripped it open and read the typewritten letter inside. Apparently, my children's sled, which I had left leaning against the side of my garage after the first snowfall last week, was visible from the street and violated Section 12.4 of the community bylaws. The letter stated that all recreational equipment must be stored out of sight when not in use. I had 15 days to remedy the situation or face a $50 fine. I looked at the sled. It was green plastic, maybe 3 feet long, and barely noticeable unless you were actively looking for something to complain about. My kids, Emma, who is 9, and Lucas, who is 7, had used it exactly once before their mother took them back to her place in Boulder. I had meant to toss it in the garage but forgot. Now it was apparently a neighborhood crisis. I crumpled the letter and went inside, too tired to care. But the anger simmered. This was the 4th violation notice I had received in 6 months. The first was for leaving my trash cans visible for 3 hours past the designated pickup time. The second was for a small oil stain on my driveway that I had to pressure wash. The third was for hanging a wind chime that apparently produced noise levels exceeding community standards. Each time, the notices came from Patricia Miller, HOA president and full-time busybody. Patricia lived 4 houses down from me in a pristine white colonial with black shutters. She was in her early 50s, with short blonde hair styled in that severe Karen cut that seems to grant supernatural powers of complaint. She wore oversized sunglasses even on cloudy days and drove a white Lexus SUV with a bumper sticker that read, "I speak to managers professionally." I am not making that up. I tried to sleep, but could not stop thinking about that stupid violation notice. Around 2 in the afternoon, I gave up and decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to clear my head. The weather was cold but sunny, typical Colorado winter. As I walked past Patricia's house, I noticed something interesting. Sitting on her back patio, clearly visible from the side street, was a rusty old grill that looked like it had not been used in years. Next to it were 2 broken patio chairs with torn fabric and a small table with a cracked top. All of it was weathered and ugly, definitely not the pristine aesthetic our HOA supposedly demanded. I stopped and stared. The irony was delicious. Patricia Miller, who enforced every tiny rule with religious fervor, had her own violation sitting in plain sight. I pulled out my phone and took several photos from different angles, making sure to capture how visible everything was from the public street. When I got home, I spent an hour reading through the entire HOA bylaws document. It was 73 pages of dense legalese, but I found what I needed. Section 15.2 stated that all outdoor furniture and equipment must be maintained in good condition and free from rust, damage, or excessive wear. Section 15.7 specified that grills must be cleaned and maintained, and any non-functional equipment must be stored out of sight. Patricia had violated at least 2 sections, and her violations were far more visible and unsightly than my kid's sled. I drafted an email that evening. I kept it professional and factual, attaching the photos I had taken. I cited the specific bylaw sections and respectfully requested that Patricia address these violations within 15 days, mirroring the language she had used in my notice. I sent it directly to her and copied the other 4 HOA board members. Her response came within 20 minutes. It was 2 sentences long. Those items are scheduled for removal. Please focus on your own property compliance. No apology, no acknowledgement of the hypocrisy, just a dismissive brush off, I replied, again keeping it professional. I appreciate your response. However, the bylaws do not provide exceptions based on future intentions. These items have been visible for several months, as evidenced by Google Street View historical images. I request the same 15-day compliance period you provided to me. This time, she did not respond. 2 days later, I received another yellow envelope. This one cited a different violation. Apparently, my lawn had dandelions growing in the side yard, which violated Section 8.1 regarding weed control. The fine would be $75 if not corrected within 10 days. I walked my entire property. I found exactly 3 small dandelions near my fence line, barely noticeable. This was retaliation, pure and simple. I treated the dandelions that same day with weed killer, documented it with photos, and sent a compliance confirmation email to the HOA board. Then I walked past Patricia's house again. The rusty grill and broken furniture were still there. I took more photos with timestamps. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. These meetings were held monthly at the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance. I had never attended one before, but I decided it was time to show up. The clubhouse was a plain rectangular building with beige walls and fluorescent lighting. When I arrived at 7 o'clock, about 15 residents were already seated in folding chairs facing a long table where the board members sat. Patricia was in the center, flanked by the other board members. Donald Crane, treasurer, Susan Walsh, secretary, Miguel Santos, member-at-large, and Robert Chen, vice president. I took a seat in the back row. Patricia noticed me immediately, and her expression tightened. The meeting began with standard business. They discussed the budget for snow removal, approved new landscaping for the entrance, and debated whether to repair or replace the clubhouse roof. It was all incredibly boring. Then they moved to the violation report section. Patricia adjusted her reading glasses and began listing recent violations. She mentioned several addresses, including mine. Unit 42 continues to show non-compliance with equipment storage regulations, she said in a clipped tone. A sled remains visible from the street. I raised my hand. I would like to address that. Patricia looked annoyed. This is not the public comment portion of the meeting. Robert Chen, the vice president, leaned forward. He was a reasonable guy in his 60s who had always seemed fair. Actually, residents can speak to violations concerning their property. Go ahead, Yates. I stood up. Thank you. The sled in question was used by my children during the first snowfall. I inadvertently left it against my garage. However, I would like to point out that I received a violation notice within 48 hours of this minor oversight, while significant violations at the HOA president's own residence have remained unaddressed for months. The room went silent. Patricia's face flushed. "Excuse me." I pulled out my phone and displayed the photos on the screen. These photos show a severely rusted grill, 2 broken chairs, and a damaged table on your back patio. All are clearly visible from Oak Street and have been there since at least July, according to historical street view images. These violate sections 15.2 and 15.7 of our bylaws. Several residents turned to look at each other, whispering. Susan Walsh, the secretary, asked, "May I see those photos?" I walked up and handed her my phone. She scrolled through them, her eyebrows rising. She passed the phone to Robert Chen, who studied the images carefully. Patricia's voice was sharp. "Those items are on my back patio, which is private property. They are visible from the public street," I countered, "just as my sled is visible from the street." The bylaws make no distinction about front versus backyard visibility. In fact, Section 2.8 specifically defines visible from common areas or public streets as the standard for all violations. Robert Chen nodded slowly. He is correct. The bylaws apply equally regardless of where on the property the violation occurs. Patricia snatched my phone from Robert's hand and glared at the screen. "This is absurd. I am the president of this board. I know the bylaws better than anyone." "Then you should know you are in violation," I said calmly. Donald Crane, the treasurer, cleared his throat. "Patricia, in the interest of fairness, we should probably address this. It does look like a clear violation." Patricia slammed my phone on the table. "Fine. I will remove the items this weekend. Are we satisfied?" "I would like the same courtesy I was given," I said. "A formal written notice, 15 days to comply, and if the violation is not corrected, a fine. That is the standard process, correct?" Robert Chen nodded. "That is correct. We should follow the same procedure for everyone." Patricia looked like she wanted to explode. Her face was red and her jaw was clenched. "This is a waste of the board's time. I will handle it. Meeting adjourned." She stood abruptly and walked out of the clubhouse before anyone could say anything else. The room erupted in conversation. Several residents came up to me, some thanking me for standing up to Patricia, others looking uncomfortable. One older man named Gerald shook my hand. "Someone needed to call her out. She has been on a power trip for 2 years. Susan Walsh approached me and handed back my phone. "You made valid points tonight. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. The board will discuss this further." I left the meeting feeling vindicated but also wary. Patricia did not seem like the type to let this go. I was right. Over the next week, I received 3 more violation notices. One claimed my house numbers were not properly illuminated, even though they were lit by a standard fixture that had been there when I bought the house. Another cited my recycling bin for being placed at the curb 2 hours before the designated time window. The third claimed my front door wreath was too large and violated aesthetic guidelines. Each violation was petty and ridiculous. I documented everything, responded to each notice with photographic evidence of compliance, and copied the entire board on every email. I also began walking the neighborhood regularly, photographing every possible violation I could find. Turns out, when you actually look, almost everyone had something wrong. Peeling paint, overgrown bushes, cars parked slightly on the lawn, faded mailbox numbers. I did not report any of them, but I kept the photos as insurance. Meanwhile, Patricia's rusty grill and broken furniture remained exactly where they were. I walked past her house every other day to check. She had not moved a single item. The 15-day compliance period I had requested came and went. On day 16, I sent a formal email to the HOA board. Patricia Miller's violations, as documented in my previous correspondence, have not been remedied within the 15-day compliance period. Per the bylaws, I request that a $50 fine be assessed for the grill violation and a $50 fine for the furniture violation, totaling $100. This time, Robert Chen responded, "The board will review this matter at our next meeting. Thank you for your diligence." Patricia responded separately, her email dripping with contempt. "Your obsession with my personal property is bordering on harassment. I suggest you focus on your own compliance before making demands of board members." I did not respond. I just waited. 3 days later, I came home from a night shift to find my garbage cans knocked over, trash scattered across my driveway and lawn. It could have been animals, but the timing felt suspicious. I cleaned it up, checked my security camera, and saw a clear image of someone in a dark hoodie kicking over my cans at 3 in the morning. The person was too far away to identify, but they walked away toward Patricia's end of the street. I saved the footage and filed a police report for vandalism. The officer who took the report was sympathetic but said without a clear identification, there was not much they could do. I understood, but I wanted the report on record. 2 days after that, I received a certified letter from the HOA. It was not a violation notice. It was a formal complaint alleging that I was creating a hostile environment within the community and harassing a board member. The letter claimed I had been stalking Patricia's property, taking invasive photographs, and using HOA meetings to publicly humiliate her. It demanded I cease all contact with Patricia and refrain from attending future HOA meetings. If I failed to comply, the board would consider further action, including legal remedies. I read the letter 3 times, my anger building. This was insane. I had followed the exact same process Patricia used against me. I had documented violations and reported them through proper channels. Now, I was being accused of harassment. I needed help. I contacted a lawyer named David Greenberg who specialized in HOA disputes. He had good reviews and offered a free consultation. We met at his office in downtown Pine Grove 2 days later. David was in his 40s with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. I explained the entire situation, showing him all the violation notices, emails, photos, and the certified letter. He listened carefully, occasionally taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "You have been documenting everything, which is good, but this situation is escalating quickly. HOAs can be incredibly vindictive, especially when a board member feels challenged. So what do I do?" I asked. "First, do not stop documenting. Every interaction, every notice, every conversation, write it down with dates and times. Second, I am going to draft a response to this harassment allegation. You have every right to report violations and attend meetings. Their attempt to silence you is likely a violation of your rights as a homeowner. Third, we are going to request a formal review of all your violation notices to establish a pattern of retaliation. Will that work? It should. But be prepared for this to get worse before it gets better." Patricia Miller sounds like someone who does not back down easily. He was right. Over the next 3 weeks, the situation spiraled. Patricia escalated her campaign against me with a ferocity I had not anticipated. I received violation notices almost daily. My mailbox was slightly crooked. My porch light was the wrong color temperature. My car was parked 3 inches too far forward in my driveway. Each notice was more absurd than the last, but each carried a potential fine if not addressed. David sent a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA, arguing that the notices constituted harassment and retaliation. He demanded an independent review of all violations issued to me and requested that Patricia recuse herself from any decisions involving my property due to clear bias. The HOA board scheduled a special meeting to address the situation. David advised me to attend and remain calm no matter what happened. The meeting was held on a Thursday evening. The clubhouse was packed. Word had spread through the neighborhood about the conflict, and apparently everyone wanted to see the drama unfold. I arrived with David, and we took seats in the front row. Patricia sat at the board table, her expression cold and controlled. The other board members looked uncomfortable. Robert Chen called the meeting to order. We are here to address ongoing disputes regarding violation enforcement and allegations of harassment. We will hear from both parties and attempt to reach a resolution. David stood first. He presented a timeline of every violation notice I had received, highlighting the sudden increase after I reported Patricia's violations. He showed the emails, the dates, and the pattern of escalation. He argued that the violations were retaliatory and that Patricia's behavior violated my rights as a homeowner. Then Patricia stood. Her voice was calm but laced with disdain. Mr. Thompson has been a problem resident since he moved in. He consistently violates community standards and then plays the victim when held accountable. His obsessive focus on my property is harassment, plain and simple. I have tried to enforce the rules fairly, but he refuses to comply. That is a lie, I said, unable to stop myself. David put a hand on my arm. Let me handle this. He addressed the board. Mr. Thompson has complied with every legitimate violation notice. He has photographic evidence of compliance for each issue. Meanwhile, Mrs. Miller's violations, which are documented and undeniable, remain unaddressed. This is a clear double standard. Susan Walsh spoke up. Patricia, have you removed the items from your patio? Patricia hesitated. I have been busy. I will get to it. It has been over 6 weeks since Yates reported the violations, Robert Chen said. That is well beyond the compliance period we enforce for other residents. Miguel Santos, who had been quiet, finally spoke. This does not look good, Patricia. We need to be consistent. If we fine residents for minor issues, we cannot ignore your violations. Patricia's control started to slip. I am the president of this board. I volunteer countless hours to keep this community running smoothly, and this is the thanks I get. Being attacked by someone who cannot even keep his lawn clean. My lawn is fine, I said, and I have never asked for special treatment. I just want the rules applied equally. The meeting devolved into arguments. Several residents stood up and shared their own experiences with Patricia's overzealous enforcement. One woman said Patricia had fined her for a lawn ornament that was supposedly too colorful. Another man said he received a violation for parking his work van in his own driveway overnight. The stories piled up, painting a picture of a board president drunk on power. Robert Chen finally called for order. We clearly have a problem here. I am proposing that we conduct a full audit of all violation notices issued in the past year. We need to ensure that enforcement has been fair and consistent. Additionally, I move that Patricia recuse herself from any decisions involving Yates Thompson's property. Donald Crane seconded the motion. Patricia looked furious, but the vote passed 4-1 with only Patricia voting against it. This is outrageous, Patricia snapped. I quit. If this board does not appreciate my work, I am done. She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the clubhouse. The room was silent for a moment, then several people started clapping. I did not join in. I just felt exhausted. Over the next few days, things calmed down. Patricia's resignation was formalized and Robert Chen took over as interim president. The board conducted the audit David had requested and found that over 60% of the violation notices issued in the past year had been directed at just 5 homeowners, myself included. The pattern of selective enforcement was undeniable. The board sent a formal apology letter and rescinded several of the violation notices, including all the ones I had received after reporting Patricia's violations. They also issued a violation notice to Patricia for the grill and furniture, assessing the standard fines. I thought it was over. I was wrong. 1 week later, I came home from the grocery store to find that someone had spray painted the word "snitch" across my garage door in bright red letters. My security camera had been covered with a plastic bag, so I had no footage. I called the police again, and this time they took it more seriously. Vandalism on this scale was a criminal matter. Officer Rachel Simmons came to take the report. She was thorough, photographing the damage and asking detailed questions. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" "I have suspicions," I said, "but no proof." "Does this have anything to do with your HOA dispute?" "Probably." She nodded. "I heard about that. My sister lives in this neighborhood. She said Patricia Miller is not taking her resignation well." Over the next week, the vandalism continued. My mailbox was knocked over. My front window was egged. Someone slashed 2 of my tires while my truck was parked in my driveway overnight. Each time, my security cameras were either blocked or disabled. The police increased patrols in the area, but they could not catch anyone in the act. I was stressed and exhausted. I had to repaint my garage door, replace my tires, and repair my mailbox. The costs were adding up, and the constant harassment was wearing me down. Emma and Lucas were supposed to visit, but I told their mother to keep them away until this situation was resolved. I did not want them seeing the vandalism or feeling unsafe. David advised me to install additional security measures. I hired a company to set up multiple cameras with backup power and cloud storage, ensuring they could not be easily disabled. I also installed motion sensor lights around my entire property. 2 nights later, the new cameras paid off. At 2:30 in the morning, a figure approached my house wearing dark clothing and a hood. They carried a can of spray paint and moved toward my front door. The motion lights clicked on, flooding the area with brightness. The person froze, then ran. But not before my cameras captured clear footage of their face. It was not Patricia. It was her son, Derek Miller. I recognized him from neighborhood gatherings. He was in his mid-20s, unemployed and still living with his mother. I called the police immediately and sent them the footage. Officer Simmons arrived within 15 minutes. She reviewed the video and nodded. "That is solid evidence. We can press charges." "Do it," I said. The police arrested Derek the next morning. He initially denied everything, but when confronted with the video evidence, he confessed. He admitted to all the vandalism, the garbage cans, the spray paint, the egging, and the slashed tires. He said his mother had been furious after resigning from the HOA and had convinced him that I was responsible for ruining her reputation. She had not directly told him to vandalize my property, but she had ranted about me constantly, and he had decided to take matters into his own hands. Derek was charged with multiple counts of vandalism and criminal mischief. Because the total damage exceeded $1,000, it was charged as a felony. The police also questioned Patricia. She denied any involvement and claimed she had no knowledge of her son's actions. Legally, they could not prove she had directed him, so she was not charged, but the damage to her reputation was severe. Everyone in the neighborhood knew what had happened, and she became a pariah. I attended Derek's court hearing a few months later. He pleaded guilty as part of a plea deal. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail. suspended, 2 years of probation, and ordered to pay restitution for all the damage to my property. The judge also mandated anger management counseling. Patricia did not attend the hearing. In fact, I had not seen her around the neighborhood much at all. Her house went up for sale 2 weeks after Derek's arrest. She moved out in early March without saying goodbye to anyone. The new HOA board, now led by Robert Chen, implemented several reforms. They created a transparent process for reporting violations, established an appeals committee, and limited the number of notices any single resident could receive in a given month without board review. They also hired a professional management company to handle day-to-day operations, removing much of the personal bias that had plagued the old system. My life slowly returned to normal. I repainted my garage door, this time choosing a slightly different shade of gray just because I could. I replaced my tires and fixed the mailbox. The sled that had started this whole mess went into the garage where it belonged, and I made a mental note to be more careful about leaving things out. Emma and Lucas came over for spring break, and we spent the week doing normal family things. We hiked in the foothills, visited the Denver Zoo, and built a fort in the backyard. They asked about the new cameras, and I told them it was just for extra safety. They accepted that without question, the way kids do. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat on my back patio with a beer and thought about everything that had happened. It had started with such a small thing, a plastic sled against a garage, but it had revealed something ugly festering beneath the surface of our neighborhood. Patricia had wielded power like a weapon, using the HOA rules to bully and control people. When challenged, she had lashed out with increasing desperation. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired, but I also felt like something important had happened. We had pushed back against petty tyranny and won. The neighborhood was better for it. Gerald, the older man who had supported me at the first meeting, stopped by a few days later. He brought a bottle of whiskey as a thank you gift. "You did a good thing," he said. "Patricia made a lot of people miserable. I am glad she is gone." "I did not mean for it to go this far," I admitted. "I know, but sometimes standing up for yourself starts something bigger. You gave people permission to speak up. That matters." We shared a drink and talked about normal things: the weather, sports, his grandchildren. It felt good to just be neighbors without drama. The next HOA meeting I attended was in May. The atmosphere was completely different. Robert Chen ran the meeting efficiently and respectfully. They discussed practical matters like repaving the neighborhood streets and organizing a community garage sale. When they reviewed violation reports, there were only 3 for the entire month, all for legitimate issues like a dead tree that needed removal. After the meeting, Susan Walsh approached me. "I want to apologize," she said. "I should have spoken up sooner about Patricia's behavior. I knew she was being unfair, but I did not want the confrontation." "It is okay," I said. "It takes courage to challenge someone in power." "Well, you had that courage. Thank you." Summer arrived and the neighborhood came alive with activity. Kids played in the streets, families barbecued in their backyards, and people actually seemed to enjoy living here. I set up a small inflatable pool for Emma and Lucas in my backyard, and several neighbor kids asked if they could join. Soon my yard became the unofficial gathering spot on weekends, and I found myself getting to know families I had only waved at before. One Saturday afternoon in July, a new family moved into Patricia's old house. They were young, maybe early 30s, with a toddler and a golden retriever puppy. I walked over to introduce myself. The husband, whose name was James, shook my hand warmly. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said. "I hope you like it here." "Thanks. Everyone seems really friendly. We were worried because we heard there was some HOA drama, but people said it got resolved. It did, I said. Things are pretty good now. Their toddler chased the puppy around the yard, laughing. It was a good sound, full of joy and innocence. This was what a neighborhood should be. That evening I stood in my driveway and looked at my house. The garage door was freshly painted, the cameras were discreetly mounted, and everything was in its place. The sled was stored properly in the garage, waiting for the next snowfall. My lawn was mowed, my trash cans were put away, and my house numbers were properly illuminated. I was in compliance with every HOA rule, not because I was afraid of Patricia anymore, but because I chose to be a good neighbor. That was the difference. Rules should serve the community, not control it. Enforcement should be about maintaining standards, not wielding power. I thought about Patricia sometimes and wondered if she had learned anything from what happened. Probably not. People like her rarely do. They see themselves as victims, never acknowledging their role in creating the conflict. But that was not my problem anymore. Derek served his probation, and from what I heard through the neighborhood grapevine, actually got his life together. He moved to Colorado Springs, found a job in construction, and cut ties with his mother. I hope that was true. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption. As autumn approached again, nearly a year after the sled incident, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. The HOA was functional and fair. The neighborhood felt like a community instead of a collection of strangers living in fear of violation notices. And I had learned that sometimes the right thing to do is stand up, even when it is uncomfortable. One October evening, the first snow of the season began to fall. Big, fluffy flakes drifted down from the gray sky, coating the grass and streets in white. Emma and Lucas were visiting, and they rushed outside with squeals of excitement. "Dad, can we get the sled?" Emma asked, her eyes bright. I smiled. Absolutely. I pulled the green plastic sled out of the garage and we walked to the small hill at the end of our street. Several other families had the same idea, and soon the hill was full of kids laughing and sliding. Parents stood at the bottom, chatting and watching. Lucas took the first run, zooming down the hill and tumbling into the snow at the bottom. He came up laughing, his face red from cold and joy. Emma went next, shrieking the whole way down. I stood there watching my kids play, surrounded by neighbors who had become friends, in a community that finally felt like home. The sled that had caused so much trouble was now just a sled again, a simple piece of plastic that brought happiness to children. That was all it should have ever been. When we got home that evening, cold and wet and happy, I made hot chocolate while the kids changed into dry clothes. We sat in the living room, watching a movie and enjoying the warmth. Emma leaned against me, nearly asleep. "Dad, this was the best day," she murmured. "Yeah, it was," I agreed. Later, after I had taken the kids back to their mother's house, I returned home to my quiet house. I put the sled back in the garage, making sure it was properly stored out of sight. Not because I was afraid of a violation notice, but because it was the right place for it. I checked my email and saw a message from Robert Chen. The HOA board wanted to thank me formally for my service to the community. They were planning to present me with an award at the next meeting for promoting fairness and transparency in neighborhood governance. I almost laughed. I did not want an award. I just wanted to live in peace. But I would attend the meeting and accept it graciously because that is what you do when you are part of a community. You show up. You participate. You contribute. The next morning, I walked through the neighborhood on my day off. The snow had mostly melted, leaving the ground damp and cold. I passed the house where Patricia used to live. The new family had put up Halloween decorations, a friendly ghost hanging from the tree, pumpkins on the porch, a welcome mat that said "Boo." It looked warm and inviting. I passed other houses where neighbors waved or called out greetings. Gerald was raking leaves in his yard. Susan Walsh was walking her dog. Miguel Santos was washing his car. Normal people doing normal things without fear or resentment. This was what I had fought for, I realized. Not victory over Patricia, but this. A neighborhood where people could live without constant scrutiny, where mistakes were just mistakes, not crimes, where a sled could lean against a garage for a day or two without triggering a crisis. When I got back to my house, I noticed that my front lawn had a few dandelions growing near the sidewalk. They were small and yellow, almost cheerful in their defiance. I considered getting the weed killer, then decided against it. They would be gone soon enough. For now, they could stay. I went inside and made coffee, then sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. I had some emails to answer, bills to pay, normal life maintenance. But first, I pulled up the HOA bylaws document, all 73 pages of it, and started reading through the proposed amendments that Robert Chen had sent for review. The changes were good, sensible modifications that would prevent future abuse. They included term limits for board members, regular audits of violation enforcement, and a requirement that all notices be reviewed by at least 2 board members before being issued. They also clarified vague language and removed several outdated rules that no longer made sense. I typed up my feedback and suggestions, sent the email, and closed my laptop. My work here was done, or at least this phase of it. The neighborhood would continue to evolve, and there would be other challenges, other conflicts, other Patricias who thought rules were weapons. But now we had a framework for handling them, and a community willing to stand up for fairness. That afternoon, I went to the hardware store and bought materials to build a small storage shed in my backyard. If I was going to keep accumulating stuff like sleds and bikes and lawn equipment, I needed proper storage. Plus, it would be a good project to work on with Lucas, who loved building things. As I loaded the lumber into my truck, I ran into Donald Crane from the HOA board. He helped me secure the load with bungee cords. "Building a shed?" he asked. "Yeah, figured it was time." "Smart. Let me know if you need a hand. I built one last year, learned a lot of lessons the hard way." "I appreciate that. I will take you up on it." We talked for a few more minutes about construction and weather and other mundane topics. It was nice, easy, normal. When I got home, I unloaded the lumber and stacked it neatly in my garage, next to the sled that had started everything. I looked at that green plastic sled and shook my head. So much drama over something so simple, but maybe that was the point. The big battles in life often start with small things. A sled, a grill, a dandelion. What matters is how we respond, whether we choose fairness or power, community or control. I chose fairness. I chose community. And in the end, despite all the conflict and stress and vandalism, it had been worth it. The sun was setting, painting the Colorado sky in shades of orange and pink. I stood in my driveway and watched the colors shift and change, feeling grateful for this moment, this place, this life I had built. Tomorrow, I would start building the shed. Next week, Emma and Lucas would visit again. The week after that, there would be another HOA meeting. Life would continue with its rhythms and routines, its challenges and joys. And somewhere in Boulder, Patricia Miller was living her life, probably still bitter and angry, still convinced she had been wronged. I hope she found peace eventually, but I was not holding my breath. Some people are too invested in their grievances to let them go. But that was not my concern anymore. I had my own life to live, my own family to care for, my own community to be part of. I went inside as darkness fell, the neighborhood settling into quiet evening routines. Lights flickered on in windows. The smell of dinner cooking drifted from nearby houses. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. It was ordinary. It was peaceful. It was home. And my sled, that infamous green plastic sled, sat safely stored in my garage where it belonged, waiting patiently for the next snowfall and the next adventure with my children. That was all it had ever needed to be.